Welcome to Creative Brews. I'm Kristen, and this is your weekly dose of creativity, where photography, design, and life come together. So, grab your favorite drink, and let's talk about what's brewing. Welcome back to another episode. I am so glad you all are here. As you can tell, today's episode is going to just be an audio only episode. I do apologize, but just like with the last season, I'll probably have these sprinkled through the year just because, we all get sick, and as I've said before, mom life. So sometimes it just helps to be able to sit down and get my thoughts together or blab about whatever the episode topic is about. And yeah, excuse me, I am still a bit under the weather. So I am filming this on the 27th of December. And me and my family kind of all got sick, sort of. Like, it was just a lot of allergy issues more than anything, because where I live, our weather is just so flip-floppy. So one day it'll be cold, next day it'll be in the 70s, or, high 60s. So for Christmas, just to, give you a little bit about that, we, got up, got ready, and we were being festive, dressing festive. I had on a cute little cardigan, Christmas cardigan. And I was looking at the weather, and it said that the high for the day would get up to 68 degrees. Isn't that crazy? So I live in North Carolina, so like I said, here the weather is very flip-floppy, to say the least. And so, needless to say, I ended up changing into a red tank top, so that way it was still kind of festive, but, anyways, we didn't really feel like doing much anyways, because we were, again, sick, under the weather. I have water. I hope you have a beverage or a little snack, So today's episode, I want to go ahead and get on into it because we're already like 3 minutes in. So, as you all may or may not know, I really, really, really find the brain and the mind and how people decide what they decide, And so this is really just going to kind of dip our big toe, to say the least, into the mind, the brain, and the self. What we were never taught, or maybe what we were kind of taught, but then have to unteach ourselves. So, and hopefully I don't sound too raspy. That's the reason why I have water today. Just because of everything. I'm on the up and up, though, so I should be getting better soon. So, fingers crossed. All right. So, we're going to go ahead and get into it. Why understanding your mind changes your whole life. So, most people are raised to believe their thoughts as facts. What you think is true. But a lot of times, that's not always the case. And I say that because you can only, I guess your thoughts are shadows of what you believe, what you perceive to believe. and how you view reality. So, through your lens and what you see as true, fake, false, all those things. Your mind is constantly narrating your life, often without your permission. I believe I've spoke about this in a different, maybe I touched on it in a different episode, but that is so true. Even if you think your mind is blank, it's not saying much, it's not doing much, our brains are always on. They're always processing, even when you're asleep. Once you realize thoughts are automatic, not intentional, guilt becomes or begins to soften. Awareness allows you to pause instead of react. So if you're very self-aware, you can realize that those automatic thoughts, because I do believe that some of your thoughts are intentional, but it really just depends on where you're at in your life and on your journey. This is where emotional regulation begins with awareness. So the more aware you are, the more emotional regulated you are, and the list goes on. So understanding your mind doesn't erase challenges. It doesn't make anything easier. It changes how you relate to them, more or less. You move from what's wrong with me to what's happening inside me. Let's figure this out. Why am I thinking like this? Why am I... but like I said, it all starts with awareness. And awareness is asking yourself internal questions, checking in with yourself daily, throughout the day, and all of that. And you can do that whether you have a busy lifestyle or not. So, no excuses. So, think about this. You don't need a new life, you need a new relationship with your mind. I'm going to leave some things to think about after each section. So, let's go ahead and get into the self and what that actually is. Identity versus awareness. So, in society, we're taught to define ourselves by roles, titles, and labels. But roles change, as we all know, and yet you remain. You change, and sometimes when you change, your role changes, your title changes, life changes. Yourself, the self, is the observer behind the experience. The self is the observer behind the experience. This is why identity shifts feel uncomfortable. The ego wants familiarity. I feel like I'm saying that word funny. When you detach from identity, you gain freedom, not emptiness. And I think that's why it's so scary, with identity shifts, is a lot of times you don't come at it from a place of, well, I'm gaining this. You kind of come from it from a place of scarcity or limiting beliefs, or, well, I'm losing this, and, you try to pay attention to the positives, even in a negative situation. It can really, 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 I don't know, you'll be surprised. You can honor who you were without staying there. So, we're talking about the place in that gray spot where people are moving from who they were to who they're becoming. And I don't think many people talk about this transitional space because while you're going through it, it's kind of hard to explain what you're going through. So once you go through it, it's kind of easier to be like, yeah, and look back on and be like, yeah, I went through that. This is how it felt. This is what I experienced. But I don't really think people talk about that as often as we would like to think. But what's important is that you notice that you become aware, like we said in the prior step. And I think once you are able to do that, you can hold space and really honor who you were without staying there. It's important to honor who you were and not stay there. Do not try to stop the growth process. Trust the process, even if it's scary. Because if you stay there and if you resist the growth, it's a lot harder to swallow and really look at yourself in the mirror and be okay and be happy with who you are, you know? So a lot of this is really just being straight up and honest with yourself. I believe that kind of explains everything. So think about it like this: you are the one noticing the thought, not the thought itself. And there's something pretty cool about being so aware and knowing you're kind of going through the changes and noticing I'm not who I once was and I'm not who I'm becoming yet. I'm not that person yet. And it's very beautiful to notice that and honor it and be okay with that. So let's go ahead and move into the biggest myth about the mind. So the myth is that growth means controlling or eliminating negative thoughts. Thoughts are generated by memory, emotion, and survival patterns. That's something else that I think is interesting to talk about. And it kind of, links into your mind. Actually, it doesn't kind of, it does link into your mind. So, trying to stop thinking often creates more mental noise. Your brain prioritizes safety over happiness. This is something we've spoke about before in a previous episode. And again, I'm filming this in December, so I'm not really too sure when I start uploading these what order they're going to go in. So, this kind of hard to say which episode it's in at the moment because I think that's something that's so easily forget. Like, we all forget that our brain operates in safetyness and familiarity and what was familiar and stuff like that, even if it's the worst thing ever. Patterns repeat because they are familiar, not because they're true, like I just spoke about. Compassion creates more change than force ever will. So think about it like this: your mind isn't trying to sabotage you. You're not, unless you are trying to self-sabotage, which is also, I think, another interesting topic to talk about. It's trying to protect you. It's a protection mechanism. So, how the brain filters your reality, whether you notice it or not. So, like I said, I think I've said this in a previous episode, your brain will program itself whether you know that or not. So you're sitting there, you're like, well, no, it's not because I'm not allowing it. But like I said previously, our brains are always on. So just because you're sitting there relaxing or resting or whatever the case may be doesn't mean your mind did not absorb your day prior. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to talk about this kind of links into some light neuroscience. I think that's something that is super interesting. It's also neuroscience is linked with, manifestation and stuff like that. So it's the science of the neuropaths of your brain, if that's how you want to think about it. The brain receives far more information than it can ever process. Like I stated, your brain is always active. It's always going. It's always filtering. It's always thinking. It's always doing something. There is no off switch. It filters based on beliefs, experiences, and perceived safety. This is why two people can live the same life but experience it differently. This is why, an example would be you and, let's just say, your boyfriend or your husband watch the same movie. But at the end, you say what you believe the movie was about, and he says what he believes the movie was about. Or maybe you're watching it with a friend. It doesn't really matter. The thing is it's two people watching the same movie, and I bet you anything that you two perceived the same movie differently. Y'all both got a different message from it. Y'all both think that it's about something different based on your beliefs, experiences, and your perceived safetiness, and also where you're at on your journey. So maybe you picked up on something different than your husband did or than your friend did, whatever it is. I think you get the example, though. Your brain looks for evidence to confirm what it already believes. When beliefs shift, perception shifts. Reality doesn't change. Your experience of it does. So how you filter reality, how you perceive reality. Okay, your beliefs don't just shape your thoughts, they shape what you notice, and that's very true. Okay, so why creatives feel things so deeply? I believe this is something that, I've kind of thought about here and there. Maybe not as frequently, but I have thought about it. So, creativity requires openness and sensitivity. Creatives often notice emotional undercurrents others miss. So, usually creatives, I think, notice a lot of what your day-to-day person who isn't a creative, what they miss. This depth fuels artistry but can overwhelm the nervous system, which I have definitely encountered. So without boundaries, creativity can feel draining instead of fulfilling, which I think is why some people burn out sometimes, so feeling deeply isn't a weakness. It's information. And a lot of times people who are very creative are very intellectual thinking, or maybe your thinking is very creative. I hope that makes sense. Usually those people have to have periods of recharging themselves without people around. Whether that be maybe they walk in nature, maybe they journal, so all the mechanisms that you can use, meditation, stuff like that, can really recharge your batteries, kind of let go a little bit. Maybe, like for me personally, it really helps for me to recharge my batteries around people that either don't drain me or by myself. Or, for me, walking in nature helps and meditation helps. So, regulation allows sensitivity to become a strength. So, by using those mechanisms, maybe you have a combination of things that you do that's sort of like a ritual that help to recharge and regulate your nervous system, but it's very important. Remember that depth is your gift, regulation makes it sustainable. So, last but not least, the last thing we're going to talk about is how spiritual awakenings connect to neuroscience. This is bridging science and spirituality naturally, is what we're going to be talking about. So, spiritual awakenings often feel disorienting at first. Oftentimes, you don't really know that you're going through a spiritual awakening. Old beliefs dissolve before new ones stabilize. The nervous system reacts to uncertainty as a threat. This is why awakenings can feel emotionally or exhausting or scary. I mean, I've been through quite a few myself, and I can tell you it was very scary. I didn't really know at the time that that was what I was going through. I kind of thought it was, but then I was like, oh no. You kind of doubt it. But, I didn't resist each time. I kind of just went with it because even though it was very scary, it seemed right. Like it seemed like, okay, this is scary. I'm recognizing what's going on. But I'm not going to resist it. Let's just ride the wave, right? So, I feel like once you've been through one, you can kind of pick up when another one is happening. And I feel like some people believe that you only experience one. I believe that you experience multiples. Everybody's different. Awareness, again, expands before clarity arrives. Science explains the process, and spirituality explains the meaning. So, some of these spirituality things and topics that I talk about can be backed and are backed by science. I know that sounds crazy. I do plan on maybe touching on some of those. I'm not really too sure if I will or not. You can definitely do your own research though. So I do advise people who's listening, tuning in, watching, do your own research. Seriously. So, with all that being said, I hope this all makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and end it here because this is already getting to be almost 30 minutes long and it's almost feeding time for my son, which is why you may or may not be able to hear him in the background. So I'm going to close with this. This season is about curiosity, not perfection. You don't need to master your mind. And honestly, I don't know that us humans will ever be able to fully grasp and fully master our minds and our brains. But we can just understand it, right? So that's why I do say you should do your own research. Because, again, two people tuning into this episode are going to get two completely different messages. And that's why I think this is so kind of crazy, whenever you actually think about it. I literally could go on with a lot of these topics. I could literally just keep talking just because it is so interesting. So remember, observation creates space, and space creates choices, and choices creates a more intentional life. So, this isn't about fixing yourself, it's about finally understanding yourself. And that is the reason why I truly think that us humans, maybe there will be one day where we completely master our minds and we understand everything. But the reason why I think that that is far fetched is because everybody's brains and brain waves and the way we think and do are so different, so even siblings, even some twins, yeah, they do share a lot of the same makeup DNA wise, but their thinking processes are still different because it's the individual. At the end of the day, it's everybody is different. Everybody is an individual. Everybody perceives things differently. Everything we've talked about basically in today's episode. So, anyways, I hope again you're having an amazing 2026. Let me know your thoughts below about all of this, and if you know of anyone that could benefit from hearing all of this, or maybe you spoke to someone and this kind of elaborates more about it, send it their way, share it. It truly helps. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And before I leave, you can also buy my new book, The Daily Divine, a book of soulful truths and everyday wisdom, which kind of links into what we've spoke about today. You can buy that anywhere you buy books. All of my links are below, as always, my social media, my book, and all of that. If you do buy a book, please tag me. I want to know about it. I know that sounds so cheesy, but I am only plugging my book because I cannot tell you guys how many people have received it and have been so surprised at the book. In of itself, they were surprised. It's kind of one of those books that you didn't know you needed. And it's definitely not your traditional book, okay? So it has chapters, but it's not a story driven book, if that makes any sense. It's a book that you can lean on every day and still be surprised at what you find. Anyways, with all that being said, if you're new here, thank you so much for being here. Please subscribe and tune in to the next episode. And with all that being said, I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.